we're fortunate to have this panel, and I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their particular expertise. And we're going to start with Jack Fenari of BizPac Review.
Okay, I basically retired businessman who 10, 12 years ago launched a second career as a political consultant, conservative activist, and now I basically am the president and CEO of BizPacReview.com, a conservative news website.
Sandy?
Hi, my name is Sandra Gehring, and you may all be interested to know that I'm a recovering mainstream media journalist. I actually have a degree in journalism and started as a broadcast reporter and then went on to management positions at CNN and NBC and the New York Times. About 2.5 years ago, I started blogging for conservative political websites, and today I'm a full-time writer, and I work with, my day job is working with both entrepreneurs and individuals who want to get press coverage or publicity. And I've written a book called Breaking Your Own News because I understand how the media works.
And Tom?
And hello, I am Tom Tillison. I am the owner and operator of the Florida Political Press. It's a local blog. We cover politics in the state of Florida, national, local. We try to cover it all. The Florida Political Press has been around now for 2 years. It's basically a voice for the Tea Party.
Okay. The point of this panel is really to give you some examples of people in the state of Florida, especially as it relates to Jack and Tom, who basically saw a void in the marketplace and created a product that they're disseminating information in now. And both of them have essentially changed the narrative in the state of Florida because of their work. Tom's work has been primarily focused towards the Tea Party market in a statewide basis. And Jack's work has been really more concentrated in the Palm Beach market, but is now taking a more statewide approach as they start to roll out. So, I'm going to start with you, Tom. Tell us a little bit about how you came to this, because your background is not even in journalism. Is that correct?
That's correct. I had never written a thing in my life 2 years ago.
Okay. So, how did you get to a point that you are now the owner and CEO of a website that's putting out daily news articles?
Well, it was the Tea Party. I'm a Tea Party activist. I got involved back in '09 in the Tea Party. I was like probably most of the people in this room. I was busy working, taking care of my family. As I got more involved, as I woke up, so to speak, I come to realize we talk a lot about the bias in the media. When you're not really plugged in, you don't necessarily notice the bias. And but as the more I became awake and the more involved I got, the more I realized just how biased the media is. And I thought, conservatives need an alternative. They need somewhere where they can go to get the stories that the media will not cover, or to get the story with a conservative spin on it as opposed to a liberal spin. And that's kind of what led to Florida Political Press. Primarily the number one motivator was the Orlando Sentinel.
Jack, you've been involved in politics for many, many years. Talk about what led you to to go from being an activist and a party member and that type of thing to wanting to do a website, and what brought you to that, and then talk a little bit about your operation, because you've got staff and you've geared up and you've made this a real business.
Well, it really started because I was a trustee of BizPac, which is BIZPAC, which is the largest business PAC in Palm Beach County, and one of the top business PACs in the state. We have seats on AAF board and all the major We're very familiar with the James Madison guys. And it's a great PAC, and its endorsement is very sought after in Palm Beach County. Because what happens is a bunch of rich people with checks get in a room and give you money if you're a politician. And what we also started to realize, it came out of a strategic plan that I was tasked to do for the PAC. The world has changed, and while a bunch of rich people giving you money is always going to be a really, really important part of politics, any one of you with your computer and some shoe leather can change the outcome of local elections, can break a story that has as much, if not more, impact than funding a candidate. And so we started to realize that we had to get with the program, you know. I mean, I'm the young Turk. I'm 54, okay? Most of our members are 65, 70, you know. So the site grew out of that, and it's funded. We have a board and shareholders, and we have an editor that edits us all to AP standards and makes us check all our sources, which is incredibly important. And that's really how it started.
Okay. Sandy, as somebody that worked in the mainstream media, can you talk a little bit about how the folks in this room can take a story and build upon it and actually get the local news or the newspaper, the mainstream media to pay attention to your story?
Sure. It's important. I know that, we get up in the morning and we watch Fox News or we watch somebody else, and it's important when you're trying to tell your story that you start locally, because you've really got to cut your teeth here first. When you have a story to tell, it's important that you've done a little bit of research about who to call with this story. So there are people you would call at radio stations or at television stations or at the newspaper to pitch your story to them. And when you pitch any story, it needs to have what in journalism we call a peg or a hook. If you can tie your story to something that's going on, remember when Katie talked earlier about how to pitch some angle of the Fast and Furious to how to make an emotional connection? That same thing applies when you're pitching a story. Let's say you had done a little bit of research about the Fast and the Furious, and you found out that there's something here that the ATF is doing which has a similar impact. You can take that when something happens about gun control or about drug smuggling or the ATF, and you turn that into your story that's timely, because the media likes timely stories, and they also like you to give them stories. One of the reasons that there's as much bias as there is because there are fewer and fewer people in mainstream media. Mainstream media is hemorrhaging. It's losing money right and left. You could probably imagine why the Sentinel is losing money. I just needed to hang in there long enough for me to retire. But in the meantime, because there aren't as many reporters or editors as there used to be, they're hungry for stories from you. And if you can pitch it effectively, so you're concise and you're smart and you're plugged in, and you pitch a story to radio or television or the newspaper, you've got a much better shot of getting it covered than you used to, because they're looking for regular people to get them interesting stories.
Jack, can you give us an example in Palm Beach County of where you guys have done a story that has actually been a game changer, that it's whether it has to do with an election or whether it has to do with local government?
All right, well, first I want to, one thing I haven't heard that was today, all the public sources of information are critical, but the hardest thing and the most important thing is you have to make friends with Democrats and liberals and progressives. What I have found, my biggest source of good stories on the other side comes from the other side. Too many conservative bloggers, we all hang out with each other, we all read the same blogs, And so too many people spend all their time writing about what they know, which is other conservatives, and giving it a little inside this. And there are a couple of big bloggers in the state that seem to do nothing but bash conservatives. All well and good. If you catch conservatives doing something, they should be held to the same standard. But within every movement, whether it's the conservative movement, the Tea Party movement, your basic Republican Party, there's 20 factions within each movement. You have to learn to play them against each other. You see a Democrat primary, call up both sides and say, hey, what do you got? They got an opposition researcher. The opposition researchers are begging the mainstream media outlets to take what they have. You take it. And then you go back after they get mad, the other side gets mad, and you say to them, well, I want to be fair. What do you have? I mean, you must, in order to break news about the other side, you have to know who the hell they are, who their friends are, who their enemies are, because within their own party, they all hate each other just like everybody hates each other in the Republican Party, okay? It's no different. You must learn who they are and what their little pet peeves are. And some of the literally, there are blood feuds within the left because someone got a better seat at a table at an event for Obama than the other person got. And they will hate each other forever. And they will leak to the press stuff about each other. You have to be one of those people that they leak to, and you have to talk to them in order for them to leak to you. So I found that was the hardest thing for me in the beginning was, and especially as Slade will tell you, a lot of my political consultant time was spent as alternative vehicles and alternative information, PACs and 527. So they really did not really want to speak to me for the longest time.
Yeah,
But,
Jack making friends with a Democrat is like, it's unbelievable.
so I would say the last thing just recently, we just blew up a story, and Tom, we have similar reasons. Another big part of why we formed this is to hopefully counteract and make smaller and smaller the Palm Beach Post. BizPac, the PAC, actually gives out once a year victims of post vendettas, and you get a little plaque and a button, and they have to write 3 horrible editorials about you. And I got my plaque in 2006. So there's plenty of basically they wrote a story that what happened was they assigned a hit squad, which they will often do, which is a former editorial writer turned reporter, and then a reporter, but a reporter who I happen to know because I have a source in the Post, breaks that wall between news and editorial and is very close friends with Randy Schultz, the editor of the senior editor for the Palm Beach Post. They went out and wrote a hit piece based on anonymous stories, mostly anonymous sources, and the sources that they had, when you really looked at it with a close eye, it was about a Democrat. It was about Dave Ehrenberg, which was, I thought, a perfect opportunity, because when you stand up for accuracy in the media, you should do it for the other side too, because it just builds your credibility that you not only want the media to be accurate about conservatives, you don't want them to lie at all. Bottom line is, I went back and I redid their whole story. I talked to all their sources. I had one guy retracted his quote. I blew their story apart. And it was our biggest story of the month. And I think it really did change the dialogue in Palm Beach County as to how much people believe what the Palm Beach Post writes. So that was the big one.
Cool. Tom, your site, you get a lot of contributing writers to it. Can you talk about how you've attracted those folks to you and how you built that network?
Well, the blogger community is just that. It's a community. The people who are out there doing it on a regular basis, they get to know each other. They interact with one another. Many times we depend on each other to support, what we're doing, our writing. If I can have another blogger pick up something that I write and put it on their blog, then it just helps me, expand that market and get more coverage. In addition to that, again, through being that I'm, associated with the Tea Party, a lot of the additional content I get comes through the Tea Party. I always make it known. Someone had mentioned earlier about writing a blog or writing something and not wanting to start your own blog. That's what the Florida Political Press is for. It is your platform to voice your opinion. I always encourage people to offer content. I operate the website entirely on my own. It's a site that I strive very hard to update daily, and I typically post anywhere from 4 to 6 articles a day, week in and week out, 7 days a week. So I'm always in the market for content, always. And if anyone, any inspiring writer out there that has something that they want to put out, contact me. I'll be more than happy to post it on the website. If you're not familiar with Florida Political Press, though, I do caution you. I don't get too far out in the weeds. I try to stick to the important issues. In the Tea Party, there is a tendency sometimes, to get lost out there in the weeds on some issues. And I just feel that we have enough important issues, real issues that need to be focused on without trying to drum up additional problems that may or may not be there.
I'm curious, how many people, by a show of hands in this room, would consider themselves a Tea Party member? I think everybody here. Wonderful. Tom, let's expand on that a little bit. Where do you think this movement is right now? And is it growing? Is it becoming more sophisticated? Or as the mainstream media says, is it dying?
Well, it's interesting. The narrative in the media for the last probably several months at least has been that the Tea Party's done. The Tea Party's dying. The Tea Party is in decline. You saw the stories everywhere. And then Dick Lugar lost in Indiana. And so now that narrative is completely gone, and now all you hear in the media right now is, well, who's the Tea Party's next target? So I think the movement is as strong as it ever was. There's been a transition away from. Early on, we were out in the streets, we were protesting, if you will. We were a lot more visible, but it's kind of gone behind the scenes. The Tea Party's gotten smarter. They've matured politically, and they're much more focused and targeted with their resources and their energy. And that doesn't necessarily always mean holding rallies, where there's thousands of people to show up. It's involving other issues like True the Vote, get out the vote issues, just basic blogging, holding the media accountable. So I think that the movement has grown, it's evolved. I think it's as strong as it ever was. It's been a long time. People don't realize it's been over 3 years, since the Tea Party first started. And that's a long time to stay in the fight. I think sometimes you see where, there'll be periods where people may tail off somewhat, but right now we are gearing up again. You can see the interest growing because of the November election, and I think the Tea Party understands, November 2010 was just the beginning. We finished the job in November of 2012, and everybody knows that.
I want to open this up to questions from y'all. You've got an opportunity here, like I said, to talk to 3 different individuals that have experience with the media. So what questions do you have, and what can we... Yes, ma'am.
Well, it seems like when I go to yahoo.com and places like that, I think they're liberal. I mean, it seems like there's more of a liberal dominance
with these media organizations organizations. Am I right or wrong? I think I'm right.
I think you're right.
But, okay, and then Obama, in his election in 2008, everybody knows how he used the internet to get a lot of advancement money and a lot of notice. And I'm just wondering, are the Republicans getting to do that now for this coming election?
Yeah, I wanted to add, with that, on Twitter particularly, in the last few years, conservatives have come to own Twitter. The left, they typically put things out there or different, using certain hashtags to try to promote or draw interest to issues that they want to push, and conservatives hijack those hashtags every single time, and I think there's been a huge turnaround in that regard. I think conservatives are much more present in the media now than they were back in '08.
Well, is there going to be a study on doing Twitter? Because I'm not even on Twitter. I'm completely out of it.
Well, and that's important because when you, and Slade, you can address what's coming up about learning Twitter, but when you think about liberals, they are, and we've seen this before, they're very skilled in social media. And we sit in rooms like this where people who are conservative are not skilled in social media, and it hurts the conservative movement. So I think, and I'm 56 years old, it's not easy for me either, but I think it's incumbent upon us to learn these things, because you have to know, like Jack said, you have to know the enemy. So you've got to, and none of them are that hard. If they were that hard, liberals wouldn't be able to do it. And I guarantee you, if you spend a day with Twitter or a day with Facebook or on LinkedIn, you will know them. It's really not that hard. You just have to decide that you're going to do it.
Yes, ma'am, right here.
How can we get young people more interested to come to our side? I find that a big problem. That comes back to education.
Well, I think I've heard that my entire life. The average age of the voter in Palm Beach County is 64 years old. I think if we, what they tweet about? Dating, Justin Bieber, they're not tweeting about politics. And I think there's a good social media thing coming up later this afternoon where true experts will be talking to you. So I don't want to get off track. Because a year ago I was not on Facebook. A year ago I was not on Twitter. In fact, when people say I wanted to do performance art, and I was going to hide my profile and not have any friends, so it would just be me on Facebook, all by myself. And just say, yeah, I'm on Facebook, and because I was real resistant. But then when you get online and you want to write, and you have to do it, and it really isn't that hard. And there's, like I said, on the schedule, some experts that I think will go through that with you.
In the back?
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you all for coming. My name is Norm Knighton, and I look young for my age. About 100 years ago, I was with the Orlando Sentinel, back when it was a Republican newspaper, and when the St. Pete Times was a conservative paper, and the Gray Lady had all the news fit to print. But like a lot of the other institutions in our country, they've been taken over, including the Democratic Party, to some extent, I think, the Republican Party. But the trade unions, the school systems, and on and on and on, including the governmental workers. And this is a paradigm, I think, that the Democrat and the current press sees the world through that prism of the left. And I think we need to create a prism of our own of shame. Shame on the Democrats. Shame on them for running this country and these children in the inner city who have no chance whatsoever. They do some of the most hideous things and they get away with it, and nobody holds them accountable. And I think that we need to preface everything we say with with the Democrats ought to be ashamed of themselves because history is going to judge them poorly, and history will judge them. But it may be too late for the rest of us if we're not successful.
Yes, sir.
Just two quick questions. The point, I think the Tea Party, from my perspective, has actually begun to take leadership position in the Republican infrastructure. The second issue is, I see the leaders of the Tea Party are primarily women. They get it. They go to the grocery store, they fill up the gas tank, they're worried about their children and grandchildren. So would you please address how the women have taken over, and importantly, and then how they infiltrated the Republican Party?
Well, I'm not sure I'm qualified to speak for all women everywhere. Although my family will tell you that I do. But, well, I mean, I think, and Tom will be better to talk about what's going on in the Tea Party, but I can tell you that in my view, even feminism has been co-opted by the left. That it used to be, it was about equality, not what it is now. And it was not a liberal agenda. It was about fairness and responsibility. And I think there are a lot of women, and I see a lot of women in some kind of powerful positions in the Tea Party. But it also, though, gives the left, I think, another opportunity to kind of smear the Tea Party because it manages to marginalize women who are in the Tea Party, and somehow it becomes about something else. So I agree with your assessment, but you're better to speak about what's going on in the Tea Party.
Well, as far as women, you know, they do make up a large percentage of the Tea Party, and you know, they're, you know, in the leadership roles, probably more so than men. You know, to me, I don't pay much attention to it because it's just normal. You know, you know, the thing about the Tea Party, you know, as I said, the media will try to marginalize us and try to draw, you know, or paint a negative picture of what the Tea Party is. But when you get involved in the Tea Party and are interacting with folks who are the Tea Party, you know, it's focused on the issues. It's focused on, you know, what steps we need to take to make this country better. It's not like the left where we're counting how many black people are sitting in the room or how many women are sitting in the room. You know, those things are not as important. And you know, I think women are, the larger groups are all dominated, you know, with women in the leadership role. You know, it's individuals, you know, using their talent and you know, pushing the ball forward. Again, I just don't really overanalyze the fact that it's a woman in a leadership role or a man. You know, the bottom line, what's most important is you know, again, trying to change the narrative, trying to drive the issues, which we've done. You know, you have seen in Florida particularly. You know, the Tea Party is involved with the Republican Party. You go to most county RECs now, and you see Tea Party presence. When we, you know, I am a member of the local REC here in Orange County. We approached the chairman, and he actually allowed us to create a Tea Party outreach committee, which I'm the chairman of. Early on, when I first joined the REC, there was definitely distance between the party and the Tea Party. They didn't really know what to make of us. We didn't know what to make of them. There was no trust there whatsoever. But as we got to know each other, it's just like anything in life. As you get to know people, you start establishing a relationship, and you get comfortable with one another, and you just drop your guard, and you come to realize, you know, a lot of our goals are the same. You know, and as we learn to trust each other and look for ways to work together, ultimately we all benefit from that. But I know that there's a lot of local RECs. Lake County, Patricia Sullivan is now the vice chair of that REC. We have Tony Ledbetter is now the chairman of the Volusia County REC. So the Tea Party is making inroads, and the Republican Party is slowly learning we're not the enemy. Because if you talk to most Tea Partiers, they'll tell you, you know, we're up against the Democrat Party, we're up against the media, and we're also up against the old guard of the Republican Party. But most of the common, the rank and file folks in the Republican Party, once they get to know who the Tea Party is, they realize, you know, there's nothing there to fear, because these people want the same thing I want.
You know, one thing I will add to that is, you know, and everybody in this room raised their hand when I asked if you were part of a Tea Party. You know, there wouldn't be a Tea Party if the Republican Party did its job. Peter?
Well, first of all, I'm with Tom on the executive board of North County Health Protection. They actually met him doing the Opera newsletter. But, you know, Lou Oliver, who's the chairman there, when he talked about the Opera newsletter, he said, you know, it's not really journalism, it's really propaganda. And understand, I mean, he represents the Republican Party in the area and promote that point of view. Now, so they have their little propaganda. Of course, you know, you talk about the Orlando Slam or the New York Times, or that's definitely propaganda to the left. Now, we don't have, you know, we've had some conversations before, Tom and I, about, let's say, maybe revealing too much information that might be negative on our side of the fence. And we don't actually have still that propaganda tool for our side, because some of the journalists on our side are still trying to be fair and balanced. It's respectable, but again, it still gives them the edge, because we're being fair and balanced, and they're being left.
I'm not sure what your question is, but
I mean, where do you draw the line between, let's say, you know, revealing information that actually makes further movement? For example, Tom actually did write an article saying that the Tea Party was dead. And it was very...
I think corruption. I think when you find corruption and self-dealing on your own side, it is important for the long-term health of the movement that people speak out about it, because otherwise you just don't have any credibility. And you know, I was a consultant with the Palm Beach County Republican Party for 7 years, and many times I had to lie for the Republican Party, and I did. And you get sick of it after a while. And at a certain point, you'll get sick of lying if you have to lie for the Tea Party. You're going to be, there is a difference between, I think, being a conservative journalist and a conservative pundit. And I would hope that most people would skew towards journalist and not pundit, because that's what we need. We need more effective reporting. And frankly, if our own media does the same thing they do, then we have no credibility. And that's not saying that you should, I think I was pretty clear about not writing about our own side every single day in my comments earlier. But there is a difference between knowing about something that is, frankly, fundamentally wrong within your own movement and not writing about it. Well, then frankly, we're no more credible than they are, so why the hell would anybody read any of us anyway? So that's the way I feel, you know.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I wanted to comment on the guy back there that was talking about Democrats and how we need to hold them accountable. Well, Republicans are just as bad. I mean, in a lot of different issues and stuff. I'm not against Republicans by any means. I run no party, but that means that I am not beholden to any party, and that I believe in beholden to the people, mostly. But the thing of it is that the one that I'm trying to hold accountable is very corrupt. And so she's a Republican. I find myself running in against opposition with that. And it doesn't matter what kind of unethical or immoral issues she's been doing. People still are trying to get her back in office again because she's a Republican. It doesn't matter what kind of a person she is. You know, and I just think that's, you know, this isn't just all Republican, is it? Because I know that's what y'all been talking about, and I was just wondering. But yeah, I mean.
Well, I'd like to jump on that.
Okay.
You know, when you're writing, as I do, you know, I do both the news and opinion at times, and it's tough sometimes to swing back and forth and remember which hat you're wearing. But regarding the Republican Party, there's some good people out there. There's some really good people out there who have the best intentions and are trying their best. But it's, as you mentioned, there's corruption there as well. It's still a political party. If I had to, express myself to say the Republican Party's first interest is the Republican Party. And that's just a reality. And as when you're writing, you have to be really careful, because I have a tendency sometimes to go harder at the right than I do at the left. And when you do that, then people start, particularly the politicians, they start seeing you differently, and they start, keeping you at a distance. I just don't subscribe to that theory that, the dictators are okay if there are dictators. Wrong is wrong. We have to expect the same standard from all of our elected officials. I don't care what follows your name, Republican, Democrat, whatever. But when you do that, when you go out on that limb, then there is a price to pay. People will, as I say, keep you at a distance, or they'll see you in a different light because you're exposing things that are not favorable to the Republican Party. But I say at the end of the day, we're better off by pointing these things out and holding our elected officials accountable and expecting more of them.
One thing I'll add, you look at the banner up there and it says Citizen Watchdog. I mean, that's why you're here. And it's to keep everybody and hold everybody accountable, not to promote one side necessarily versus the other side, but to make sure all of your elected officials do the right thing and serve you the right way. Yes, sir.
I'd like to say one thing to your comment. It's how to leak a story, okay? And first of all, making broad allegations, this person is corrupt. Okay, I get 20 emails like that a week. Generally speaking, they're the ones I read last, okay? Because that's a very powerful word. Instead of picking out one thing that you have documented, all right, and then you have facts, and then you say, this person violated campaign law for this reason, here's a documentation. And you get it, would you stick to one thing, okay? When you get people who hit you with 40 things going back 20 years, I figure they ran over your cat one day, and they're probably going to look at it, I'm going to spend like days going through this, and it's not going to be worth it. So as someone who, on the other side of the fence before this, leaked hundreds of stories, okay, stick to one thing, your best shot, give them an angle and give them documentation, and they'll pick it up.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask Sandy to expand on that a little bit from the mainstream side. But, one of the most brilliant people at creating a story and sucking in the other side was Andrew Breitbart. And, at lunch today, our speaker's James O'Keefe. And I think most of you know the story. But the way they rolled out that story as it related to to Acorn and the prostitution thing was absolutely brilliant, because what they did is they teased the media, and the media tried to respond to it and put it under, sweep it under the rug. But every time they came back, there was more to the story, and it just kept building and building, and it single-handedly brought Acorn down. I mean, it was brilliant. Sandy?
Well, and Andrew Breitbart was nothing short of genius. I mean, if you recall, he was the one who also brought Representative Anthony Weiner down. But he also had to have very thick skin, because he was, remember how roundly criticized he was by the entire mainstream media. But he was right, and he knew he was right. When you're talking about, Jack's absolutely right. If you're trying to sell a story, and make no mistake, you're trying to sell a story to the mainstream media, you need to be making one point, just one. And it needs to be factually backed up. You can't, you're not going to get someone to bite on a story because you're unhappy with something or because you think someone is unethical. You need to be able to demonstrate specifically what it is you're talking about. Okay? And I think the less emotional you can be in the pitch of a story, journalists tend to be more liberal, as you have observed. I'm not, but many are. But a lot of them, particularly below the management level, don't realize that they have a liberal bias. Honest to God, they don't know. They don't see this. They're coming out of colleges and universities today being taught by academics who are incredibly liberal, and so they really think that this is how all of us think. They really do. And a long, long time ago, I was one of those people, but they don't think they have a bias. And so you need to know that when you're watching what they're doing and trying to figure out how to talk to them, they think they're in the middle. Now, when you get high enough up and you're talking about things on the editorial page, clearly they're aware of how they feel about things and what they're doing. But when you're talking to reporters who are only telling one side of the story, a lot of times they're not doing it on purpose. It's hard to believe because it seems so slanted. But you give them more credit than they deserve. They're not clever enough, actually, to shape them that way. So just know that, you can get back to them with, well, but you only talk to high school principals and teachers. Why didn't you talk to any parents? I've got some parents you could talk to. So when you approach things that way, you'll be more successful in pitching a story. And I'm not defending all of journalism. I'm just telling you, this is how they work.
I'd like to make one related point just very quickly because everyone here seems to be wanting to, citizen journalists. The better your facts, the more you should tone down your rhetoric. And I'll tell you, there's one sentence I wrote that to this day it kills me. I wrote it. I was the blogger that broke the story 2 or 3 months when I was volunteer blogging for the Sun Sentinel. I broke the story that Charlie Crist was going to leave the Republican Party. And it got picked up all over the place, and the Charlie Crist administration tried to get me kicked off of the Sun Sentinel, and the editorial board stood up for me, and they're not all bad. And they stood up for me, and they backed me, and blah, blah, blah. But, as my mother always told me, child, you have a wicked tongue. I called in that post Jim Greer, Charlie Crist's bovine bully boy, okay? And instead, I took away from what I had, which was I had 2 sources, and I had somebody in the room where they discussed Charlie Crist running as an independent months before anyone had ever even, that it was a real breaking story. And I took away from that. And that one sentence was used to attack the heck out of me by Charlie Crist allies. So the better your scoop, the better your news, pull back the emotion, pull back because you're taking away from it. And I think that applies to your point, but also in a broader context.
And I wanted to add to that from the Tea Party's standpoint. The strength of the Tea Party's always been the emotion and the passion that we bring to the table. But sometimes that can be a weakness as well. And I've learned through my own writing, when you expose your bias, when you show people your motivation, then they look at what you write or what you're trying to say a lot more skeptically. So if you want to get your message out there and you want people to give it fair consideration, don't show that bias. Don't betray that. Put it to the side and stay focused on the story and drive it. Instead of allowing the emotion to push you to express your own opinion, you use that energy and effort to build the story, make it stronger, have your facts and the documentation or any evidence that you may have that will make the story stronger, as opposed to pouring all that energy into your own emotion.
You know,
Well, ultimately, I see it ultimately as taking a look or being able to see the bigger picture. And if you're trying to accomplish something, you know, you look at the bigger picture and how this is going to affect the big picture, as opposed to just the immediate of venting and pouring your emotion out.
I think the lesson here is don't be guilty of the same bias that you're accusing the other side of. You know, one thing before we get to your question, this right here is one of your best tools. I mean, you can take a smartphone to a city council meeting, to a school board meeting, anywhere you want to go, and put on that video and start recording it. You can ask elected officials or candidates questions with your smartphone. That you can create news with your phone so easily, and once you take that and then go post it online, it takes on a life of its own. Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is directed to Tom about the Republican Party. Let me say I'm a member of the Tri-County Tea Party, which is very strong up in Lake County, or up in Marion County. The thing about it is I've also belonged to the Founders Club, which is a spin-off of the Republican Party. I find that they're more receptive to us than the Republican Party. And I think I've had people tell me in the Republican Party say, well, you guys moved in 2010 and you got a lot of people elected in the House. We didn't really do our job. They have the money, we don't have the money. So a lot of politicians will go to them and get the money. Of course, we don't support them with money. We support them with people, with votes. But let me ask you, how can we get the Republican Party to get with the Tea Party and really be a strong force? That's the question I'm asking.
Well, I think we're fortunate. I don't know if those of who knew Chairman Dave Bittner before he passed. He was very open to the Tea Party and very receptive to the Tea Party. His replacement is Lenny Curry, and in my interactions with Lenny, I find the same thing. He understands the strength of the Tea Party. He understands the value it brings to the party. The challenge that we have with the Republican Party is the old school or old guard, if you will, those who have something to protect, and they see the Tea Party as a threat to that. I think it's just, as I mentioned earlier, establishing relationships at the county level with the RECs, getting to know the chairman. Most REC chairmen in the state are open to the Tea Party. There are some who are absolutely not. There are some who shut them out entirely and completely. If that's your case, then you need to contact Lenny Curry. Write him a letter or write an op-ed and send it to me and I'll post it. But let them know that the struggles and the problems that you are having. I was on a conference call with Lenny Curry about 2 months back talking about the upcoming election, because again, they understand they need the Tea Party enthusiasm to help them get the results that they're looking for in November. But he said then, we talked about some RECs, and he mentioned then that if you're having problems in your county, let me know.
One thing I'll add to that as far as the party perspective is concerned, one of the things that they don't like about us is that we don't want to compromise. I mean, the party tends to compromise, and elected officials tend to compromise to get things done. But I think everybody in this room realizes where we are in time, and that compromise has just basically been the art of losing slow. You know, so we're tired of compromise.
What I think, if I could, what I think you have to,
Here and here.
what I think you have to understand is that there are, I think, because I've been on both sides of the fence, and believe me, I was a rebel within the Republican Party before there was a Tea Party. You have to find a common ground where you can work the Republican Party, but you also have to understand that you're fundamentally different organizations, even in setup. The Republican Party, and please, I don't want to talk about the issue, okay? E-Verify, okay? Everybody wants to say, that was a donor revolt on the Republican Party side. They need tens of millions of dollars to run elections every year. Massive amounts of money. The Republican Party in this state is built on agriculture, insurance, real estate, okay? They donate more money than you can imagine to candidates all over this state. They revolted. There would have been no Republican Party if they said, well, guess what? We'll keep our 50 million this year. So fundamentally, the importance of the Tea Party remaining grassroots is that you're never so dependent on massive funding that you can be put out of business when you go the wrong way. I mean, ag is a Republican, major Republican donor base. You know, you can all pick on different, but that wasn't going to happen because every Republican major donor in the state said, you better not. And that's just the way it goes sometimes. So I think it's important that you cooperate when you can and understand that there are things that you're going to have to battle it out in the marketplace of ideas.
That's also why there's primaries.
I know Lenny Curry very well. I also remember why and I'm a member of the RPOF, and I go to their quarterly meetings, and they don't have a democratic organization where everybody can stand up. They have a chairman's, and then they have a committeeman and committee women's group, and only those people get to ask questions or make comments. That's number one. Number two, at a meeting in the last few days, I told a Republican club, and to answer this lady's question, if you want to make some inroads in the Republican Party, you start getting the Republican clubs. I've got 6 in my area, Republican clubs, and 8 Tea Parties. You start getting those members that have fled the local Republican executive committees, going back like the firemen and policemen did at 9/11 into the big buildings, going back into the local Republican executive committees and start taking it back, because the amount of corruption that we have in there of people who get control, and the way they do it is they get a lot of government officials when they have elections for say county chairman every 2 years. They get all their buddies that they have gotten in government to finally show up. They never show up any of the 12 months, despite the rules that you have to have excused absences or you shouldn't be a member. Now you need to talk to Mr. Curry about how these people never come to committee meetings and never send any of their staff. So they don't even know what's going on. And here, the Republican Club is supposed to be the support for the Republican politicians. So that's another reason. But get the Republican clubs and Tea Parties in your area, to the people that have fled them. You talk to your Tea Party people there, and they'll say, we don't want anything to do with a lot of these county things. And they've got all kinds of problems. And they're not even enforcing their own rules. After the Jim Greer thing, which is going to be the same month, coming up, this big trial in August of Jim Greer on money laundering, fraud, and so on, they don't want to even enforce their Appendix A on whistleblowing reprisals.
You got a question?
All right, I'm just giving some thoughts about this. But my question is, why don't you, as people, start talking about posting on your website? My question is, can't we post on our websites of all these people here as much as possible? Get out the main websites and provide those websites to all county officials about what's going on. Just the websites only of the James Madison and so on, so that you can send it to these county officials to know that we're monitoring, put some fear in them.
Well, I do want to point out, when I'm talking about the RECs, I probably should have focused more on Volusia County and what did happen out there, because they had a lot of resistance from the chairman. They just would not give them any room to be involved or to be a part of it. But yet the guys that made up the Tea Party and the 9/12 out there, they stayed focused, they kept pushing, and they kept highlighting their challenges and highlighting the problems that they were having, and they were persistent, and they continued to do the right things and communicate the resistance and the unfairness that they were encountering out there. And finally, Lenny Curry stepped in, he removed the chairman, and he made the vice chairman, which was Tony Ledbetter, who's a 912 member, and he made him the chairman of that REC. Now that's a unique situation, and as you mentioned earlier, money is what makes the party go around, but there has been progress made with the Republican Party, but there's a long, long way to go, because again, they primarily are driven by money, and they're looking out for their interests first and foremost.
I would also say be careful what you ask for, okay? Well, if you join an REC, and again, I was on an REC for about 15 years, you have a loyalty oath, okay? And to me, it's even more of and backed by Florida statute, it's a misdemeanor to break your loyalty oath, actually, in this state. Both parties have it. But more importantly, it's your word of honor. So if you really want to be an independent voice, when I started BizPac Review, I resigned from the board of directors of the Republican Party. I resigned my REC seat. I resigned because you're either a journalist, you can be a conservative journalist, or you're not. And I think I think it's awfully hard to write about something that you're a member of, okay, with a loyalty oath too. I think it's awful hard to be credible with that baggage. So you have to decide what you want to be. Do you want to be someone who writes in their county as an REC member, who basically will end up only getting read by fellow REC members, or do you want to move and be, try and expand what you're doing? And I think you have to get rid of what are considered unacceptable conflicts of interest in the journalism world, if you're going to be considered a real journalist.
We're going to take two more and then move on. One here and one here. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm from Pinellas County, and just a brief thing on the Republican thing. My experience is just like Bill's, the Republican Party in Pinellas. They've never once said the word open business or new business in the meeting, never. But my question to the panel is, in my writing, I find out that most of my time goes into research. I'm wondering if there's a database, like LexisNexis or a different database. I know they exist, the ones that you can go back and look at news articles from like 10, 20 years ago, because a lot of the politicians that we're seeing, they're getting recycled. And the St. Petersburg Times has scrubbed a lot of the articles on their request. And they actually got rid of a guy that wrote an article on light rail.
You guys know anything?
And that kills the, and I do Freedom of Information Act request, but they drag it out so long that the issue's gone by the time you get the information. That's why, it's like catch-22.
Well, the Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, as you've heard earlier, is slow and cumbersome. I do like LexisNexis. I also, some of the papers have gotten rid of their older archives, and so you may have to do some interviewing yourself. I'm never incredibly comfortable with, as a source, using the media. And you see this a lot on TV, where the media is interviewing the media. That's not really a fundamental tenet of journalism. We should be sourcing these things. I mean, you can use Google all you want, and use older articles from other places, but I think the more effective way to write and communicate is to begin developing your own sources and interview people. And you can even interview people about what they recall from having happened 10 years ago, rather than, if we just keep sourcing each other, if we just keep talking to each other about each other, and then we talk to the media about the media, it doesn't advance it any. And so I try not to approach writing that way. I try and actually find someone who knows, rather than using the media as the source.
Okay. Last question.
I started out to have a gripe session about the RPOF and the RECs and so on, and how they exclude all the Tea Parties. And they do, and it's a hierarchy. And it's a closed system that doesn't really, well, in my county, doesn't welcome Tea Party participation or 9/12 participation. And then I just recently, and we have a state committee candidate in my county, and he's run for every county office he can, and he doesn't win any of them. And he's up for state committeeman now. And he's going to be on the ballot. And I said, well, why are you on the ballot? He says, this is an elected position because I represent all Republicans. And my attitude is that I've been a Republican since my grandfather told me I was a Republican. I don't want this guy representing me. And I guess my question is, can the independent media get involved here and find out why we have to have such a closed system and why they have to be, all of us have to be represented by their candidate. I mean, their representative. Can we break this down?
It's an election.
And this might not be popular, but, you know, the Republican Party, you know, you're not forced to be a member. You're not forced to be a part of it. You know, they have, it's not a democracy, you know, and they have their rules and by rules, and the one thing that we have tried to do, and to some success, limited success, is, you know, to try here locally in Orange County is to become a member of the REC, and there's a fair number of us who are, and that way we have the opportunity to ensure that body reflects our values. And if it gets steps out of line, then we have the avenue to pursue to point that out to the party officials. But again, as I said before, it comes back to building relationships. It's difficult because you have, you know, I've learned from the Republican Party that they're all about like earning your stripes. You know, when they, you know, it's those people who have been there and put in their time, as they say, and you know, they've been the good soldier and have done all the things along the way. You know, that pecking order is established, and they very much rely on that. So when an upstart like myself or somebody in this room who hasn't been involved in the last 10 or 15 years suddenly shows up, then yeah, that's you're looked upon skeptically. They take what you have to say with a grain of salt. A lot of that's trying to protect, again, their own standing. But as I said, you have to build those relationships and be able to establish some form of communication. It can't always be, you know, two adversaries going at one another, because you're never going to accomplish anything. And it's hard to do sometimes. They make it damn difficult, you know, at times because of the attitude that they have toward you.
We're going to wrap up. One thing I do want to say, we talked, the issue of money came up a couple of times here. And, you know, and money does drive politics to a great extent. But what I hope we can do, and all of us in this room can do, and the more that the Tea Party movement grows and the more sophisticated we get in how we operate, is that we can start to take that money aspect out of the equation. It really ought to be about issues and about people. And if you guys walk out of here and can actually do what you came here to learn today, and start reporting stories, start holding people accountable, all the money in the world can't overcome the truth. And so, with that, let's give the panel a hand and